My husband hired a hitman to get rid of me and take all my money. Days later, I faked my own death, and he never imagined what I was capable of doing to get revenge for all his malice. Naomi Vance stepped out of the high-rise building of her prominent downtown law firm with a powerful sense of accomplishment. But inside, she couldn't hide the growing unease she felt. She had just won a major corporate case, one that guaranteed her more prestige and a substantial year-end bonus. Around her, the applause from colleagues and the pats on the back felt like empty echoes. A practiced smile was fixed on her face, but her mind drifted toward Julian, her husband, who in recent months seemed to have become a total stranger. That night, Naomi arrived at their home earlier than usual. The residence, an elegant brownstone in an exclusive Buckhead neighborhood of Atlanta, was quiet. The lights were on in the living room, but Julian wasn't in his usual armchair. His sport coat was draped over the back of the sofa, and a half-finished glass of whiskey rested on the glass table. "Julian!" she called out firmly. From the kitchen came the metallic sound of a refrigerator door being closed. Julian appeared, impeccable as always, with his shirt perfectly pressed and his hair slicked back. There was something in his smile that tied Naomi's stomach in knots. "You're home early," Julian said with a light tone, though his eyes seemed to be measuring her. "I closed the case ahead of schedule. I thought we could have dinner together like old times," she replied, dropping her briefcase onto a chair and unbuckling her heels. Julian paused briefly, as if evaluating the proposal, and then nodded. "Sure. Let me order something. I haven't had time to cook." While Julian pulled out his phone, Naomi watched him with a mixture of affection and something darker. The distant expression he had recently adopted unsettled her. The small lies she had detected in his words and his constant absence had begun to erode the trust that was once the pillar of their marriage. That night, while they ate takeout sushi in front of the television, Naomi tried to break the ice. "How's the Onyx Lounge doing? Busy lately?" she asked, feigning disinterest. Julian, focused on his plate, replied without looking up. "It's fine. People never stop going out. There's always something to celebrate." "I'm glad to hear that. You seem so busy lately. I barely see you." Julian looked up for an instant. A flicker of irritation crossed his gaze before he masked it with a smile. "You know how it is. I work hard now so we can be comfortable later." Naomi nodded, but her mind wasn't convinced. Dinner ended in an awkward silence. When Julian retreated to the bedroom, she stayed in the living room with her laptop, supposedly checking emails. Curiosity pushed her to look at Julian's phone, which he had carelessly left on the table. She knew the passcode. There was a time when they shared everything without reservation. Naomi quickly opened the phone and navigated through recent messages. One, in particular, captured her attention. An exchange with someone saved as P. The message read, "All set for tomorrow. Remember, there can't be any mistakes." Naomi's heart started pounding faster. What were they talking about? The message was cryptic, but there was something in its tone that made her feel vulnerable. Julian had never been a man with secrets, or so she had believed. She immediately closed the phone when she heard Julian's footsteps returning. He stopped in the doorway and looked at her with a neutral expression. "Still working?" he asked, with a tone that almost sounded accusatory. "Yeah, a couple of things to review," Naomi said, closing her laptop hastily. Julian nodded and returned to the bedroom without saying another word. She remained seated on the sofa, feeling the facade of her marriage begin to crack. The sensation of being watched invaded her, as if her every move were being tracked. The tension grew days later when Naomi and Julian attended a dinner with close friends. On the surface, everything looked perfect. Julian was charming, attentive, and conversational. Everyone at the table admired how well they complemented each other as a couple. But Naomi did not miss the way Julian avoided any prolonged eye contact with her. During the dinner, Chloe, Naomi's best friend, noticed something was off. She took advantage of a moment alone in the restroom to ask, "Naomi, is everything okay? You've been a little distant tonight." Naomi hesitated before answering, struggling to keep her voice neutral. "Sure, just tired from work." Chloe looked at her intensely, as if she could see right through her facade. "You know you can tell me anything. I've always been here for you." "I know, Chloe. Thank you," Naomi replied, forcing a smile before returning to the table. When the dinner ended, Julian insisted on staying a few more minutes to talk with one of the men in the group while Naomi waited in the car. From the passenger seat, she saw Julian talking in a tone that seemed more serious than usual. The man he was speaking with handed him an envelope, and Julian quickly tucked it into the inside pocket of his jacket. On the way home, Naomi tried to suppress her anxiety but couldn't help asking, "What were you and that man talking about?" Julian didn't take his eyes off the road as he responded calmly, "Club business. Nothing that would interest you." The coldness in his response hit Naomi like a bucket of ice water. For the first time in years, she felt completely alone next to the man with whom she had built her life. That night, while Julian slept soundly, Naomi stayed awake in the living room, holding a glass of wine and looking at the Atlanta skyline through the window. Thoughts swirled in her mind. What was going on with Julian? What did those messages mean? The feeling of danger was inescapable, but she had no concrete evidence, only her intuition, and that wasn't enough to act. The sound of Julian's phone vibrating on the table startled her out of her thoughts. This time, she didn't hesitate. She checked the screen and saw a message from P. "Tomorrow is the day. Don't fail." Fear and confusion flooded her. She decided not to confront him, at least not yet. She needed to know more before drawing conclusions. But deep down, a dark truth was beginning to emerge. Julian was not the man she thought she knew. In that moment, as the city continued its nightly routine, Naomi made the decision to protect herself, though she didn't yet know how. The man sleeping in the next room was no longer her husband. He was an enigma, and every step she took from then on would be marked by a danger she was only beginning to glimpse. The insistent sound of the alarm clock filled the room, but Naomi was already awake. She had spent the night in a restless vigil, unable to escape the thoughts that invaded her mind. Every time she closed her eyes, the words of the message from P echoed disturbingly. "Tomorrow is the day. Don't fail." She looked at Julian, who was sleeping peacefully beside her. The calm on his face contrasted with the storm she felt inside. The trust she once had in him crumbled further with every moment. Naomi knew she had to act, but she also knew that one wrong move could cost her everything, even her life. Upon arriving at her office, Naomi tried to focus on her cases. Her assistant, Elena, noticed her distraction and made a casual comment. "Looks like you didn't sleep well. Everything okay at home?" "Just a bit of work stress, nothing out of the ordinary," Naomi replied, forcing her tone to sound nonchalant. Elena nodded and left the office, but her words left Naomi with a bitter feeling. Was it that obvious something was wrong? Could Julian notice that she was growing more distant? After reviewing documents for hours without really paying attention, Naomi made a decision. She hired a private investigator. Her reputation as an attorney had connected her with trusted people in various fields, and the man she chose, Darius Stone, was known for his discretion. When she called him, her voice trembled slightly. "I need your help. It's delicate, and I don't want anyone to know." "Of course, Ms. Vance. Tell me where and when," Darius replied. That same evening, Naomi met Darius at a discreet coffee shop. Although she was covered with a scarf and dark sunglasses, she feared someone might recognize her. Darius was a man of few words, but his presence inspired confidence. "What do you need me to investigate?" he asked, pulling out a small notebook to take notes. Naomi hesitated before answering. Saying it out loud made everything feel more real. "It's my husband. I think he's planning something against me. He's been acting strange, receiving suspicious messages. I need to know who he's meeting and what he's doing when he's not at home." Darius looked at her seriously, noting every detail. "I'll do everything possible to get answers, but you have to be prepared for what might come out of this. Sometimes the truth is darker than we expect." Naomi felt a shiver run down her body. Days later, Darius delivered his first report. Naomi received it at the office, locking the door before opening the envelope. Inside were photographs of Julian meeting with a robust man who had scars on his face. The images showed them talking animatedly in an alley behind Julian's nightclub. There was something disturbing about the man's posture, the way he shook Julian's hand, as if closing a deal. Along with the photos, Darius included information about the man. Duke Miller. He's linked to an organized crime group known for extortion and disappearances. Naomi's heart sank as she read the name. Duke had a history that included charges for kidnapping, although he had never been convicted. The connection between him and Julian was alarming. Naomi called Darius immediately. Her voice trembled as she asked, "Why would my husband be meeting with someone like him?" "I don't know yet, but there's something else you should know," Darius replied cautiously. "I intercepted another conversation between them. They talked about the plan. They didn't mention specifics, but it's clear they are organizing something, and it doesn't sound legal." Naomi's blood ran cold hearing those words. For years she had dealt with criminals in her work, but she never imagined something like this would reach her own home. The image of Julian as the kind, trustworthy man she had married began to completely crumble. That night, Naomi attempted to confront Julian. She couldn't hide her discomfort any longer. During dinner, she watched him intently, searching for any sign of guilt. Julian, as if noticing her inquisitive gaze, raised an eyebrow and smiled. "What's wrong? You're very quiet today." Naomi decided to test the waters. "I'm just worried you're working too much at the club. I don't want you getting into trouble with dangerous people." Julian put down his fork and stared at her for a moment. His expression seemed to harden before softening again. "Why would you say that? Have you heard something?" he asked, with a tone that sounded more defensive than he probably intended. "No, nothing. I just want you to be okay. You know I'm always here for you." The smile Julian returned was superficial, almost forced. The conversation quickly changed subjects, but Naomi knew that something in him had changed. Perhaps he suspected she was finding things out. The crisis point came the next day when Naomi received an unexpected call from Darius. The investigator's tone was urgent. "We have a problem. It seems Julian is suspecting something. Duke was seen talking to one of my men. I'm sure it wasn't a coincidence." Naomi felt the ground crumble beneath her feet. "What does that mean? Am I in danger?" "I'm not sure, but if Julian is aware that you're investigating him, he could speed up his plan. You need to be very careful, Naomi. I think you should consider involving the police." The advice resonated in her mind for hours. As the days passed, the tension in her home became unbearable. Julian was more attentive, almost as if trying to distract her. He brought her flowers, invited her to romantic dinners, but Naomi knew it was all a facade. Behind that kindness was something dark, something she had to unmask before it was too late. That night, while Naomi reviewed Darius's documents again, she found a detail she had missed before. Julian had made substantial wire transfers to an anonymous account weeks prior. The dates coincided with his meetings with Duke. Naomi felt like time was running out. Her life, her future, everything was at stake, and the man she shared her bed with could be her biggest threat. The storm that had started with cryptic messages and clandestine meetings was now about to explode. Naomi knew the betrayal was not only real, but could be deadly. The dawn brought a crucial decision for Naomi. The night before, after hours of deliberation, she had reached a conclusion. She could no longer continue alone. The danger was imminent, and the survival instinct finally pushed her to cross a line she never thought she would have to. That morning, with a mix of fear and determination, she went to the Atlanta Police Department's Zone 5 precinct. At the station, the detective in charge, Marcus Jones, was an experienced officer known for his patience and ability to deal with complicated cases. When Naomi entered his office, he greeted her with a look that mixed respect and curiosity. He knew who she was. Her name was known in legal circles, and he couldn't ignore the air of tension emanating from her. "Ms. Vance, how can I help you?" Detective Jones asked, gesturing to the seat in front of his desk. Naomi took a deep breath before responding. Every word she was about to say brought her one step closer to the truth, but also to danger. "I believe my husband is planning to kill me," she blurted out, without embellishment, without detours. The silence that followed was oppressive. Detective Jones stared at her, evaluating her words and her expression. "Do you have evidence for what you're saying?" he asked in a calm but firm tone. Naomi opened her bag and placed Darius's report, the photographs, and the messages she had found on Julian's phone on the desk. Detective Jones took his time reviewing the documents, nodding slightly as he read. "This is serious. If what you are saying is true, we need to act carefully. One wrong move and we could alert him. Are you willing to cooperate with us?" Detective Jones asked, looking Naomi directly in the eyes. "I will give you whatever is necessary to stop him, but I need to ensure he cannot escape if he finds out I know anything. I don't know what he might do to me," Naomi responded, her voice trembling. The plan began to take shape that same afternoon. Detective Jones gathered his team and they discussed possible strategies. The priority was to get more solid evidence that could hold up in court. Although the recordings and photographs were a good start, they needed explicit confirmation of Julian's intentions. For that, they decided to infiltrate an informant into the meetings between him and Duke. Naomi watched in silence as the agents discussed the details. The feeling of being at the center of a police operation was surreal, but she knew she had no other choice. Her safety depended on them. "What happens if they discover the informant?" Naomi asked, unable to hide her worry. "It's a risk that always exists, but we are prepared to handle it. Our job is to ensure you are protected at all times," Detective Jones replied in a reassuring tone. Although the detective's words tried to offer comfort, Naomi couldn't ignore the unrest growing inside her. Everything she had believed in for years, her marriage, her life, was collapsing before her eyes. Days later, the police managed to place the informant, a man named Leon Leo Walker, into Duke's circle of trust. Leo, with his tough appearance and ability to gain the confidence of dangerous men, began working as a supposed collaborator in Duke's operations. The first recordings he delivered revealed alarming details. In a captured conversation, Duke and Julian spoke openly about the plan. "Everything is ready. We just need her to trust the routine. She doesn't suspect a thing. She's too naive," Julian said in a cold tone that Naomi barely recognized as her husband's. "Are you sure there won't be problems? I don't want anything to go wrong and splash back on us," Duke responded with a warning tone. "Trust me, everything will go as planned. By the time someone realizes, it will be too late," Julian concluded. Naomi listened to the recording in Detective Jones's office, her hands tightly clenched in her lap. Every word was a dagger piercing the image she had built of Julian. She felt a mix of fear and fury, but above all, a deep sadness. That man, the same one who had promised her eternal love, was now talking about her life as if it were a mere obstacle to be eliminated. "Is this enough to move forward with the operation?" Detective Jones said as he turned off the recorder. "But I need you to know it will be dangerous. Are you sure you want to continue?" Naomi looked up, her eyes full of determination. "There's no turning back. If we don't stop him now, he'll end up carrying out his goal." The controversy arose when the team decided that Naomi should actively participate in the operation. The idea was to record a conversation between her and Julian, where she, without directly confronting him, would push him to reveal more details of his plan. Detective Jones knew it was a risk, but it was also the best way to get a direct confession. Naomi was terrified. The idea of facing Julian, knowing what he planned, was overwhelming. But her fear turned into anger when she remembered the recordings. He saw her as a disposable object, an obstacle to be removed. She was not willing to allow it. That night, when Julian arrived home, Naomi greeted him with a practiced smile. The police had installed a hidden microphone in her necklace, and every word would be transmitted in real time to Detective Jones's team. "I've missed you, Julian. I feel like we've been so distant lately," Naomi said as she poured 2 glasses of wine. Julian seemed disconcerted by her attitude, but settled onto the sofa and accepted the glass. "I've been busy with work. You know how it is," he replied casually. "Sometimes I wonder if it's all worth it. So much effort, so many hours away from each other. I just want us to be okay, like before." Julian looked at her with a mixture of caution and something darker. For a few seconds, silence filled the room. "We are fine, Naomi. You don't have anything to worry about," he finally said, though his tone lacked warmth. Naomi felt her heart pound, but she forced herself to maintain composure. "I just want you to know that I trust you. I always have. No matter what happens, I'm here for you." The words were loaded with double meaning that did not go unnoticed by Julian. Although he didn't respond immediately, his gaze was intense, almost as if trying to decipher Naomi's true intentions. When they went up to the bedroom, Julian embraced her tighter than usual. Naomi felt a chill run down her body, but she didn't pull away. She knew every passing moment was a dangerous game, and the slightest sign of weakness could jeopardize the entire plan. Inside, Naomi knew the worst was yet to come, but she was also willing to face it. Her life no longer belonged only to her. Now it was part of a bigger struggle, a fight to survive and regain her freedom. Hours later, Naomi and Detective Jones's plan would begin. The night was dark and silent when Naomi met the police team in a derelict warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Flashlight beams barely illuminated the space, enough to reveal the scene. A technical team checked cameras, makeup, and recording equipment. Detective Jones, with a serious expression, reviewed the details of the operation. "This is what we'll do," Detective Jones said, pointing to a blueprint on an improvised table. "We need everything to look like a real accident. The key will be capturing Julian's reaction. If he reacts as we think he will, we'll have enough to catch him." Naomi stood next to the table, nodding with a clenched jaw. Every word she heard reminded her of the surreal nature of the situation. She was not only the victim, now she was a key piece in a trap designed to unmask the man she had once loved. Hours later, the warehouse was transformed into a carefully choreographed scene of chaos. Makeup artists worked with precision to create false injuries on Naomi's body. Her face was covered with artificial cuts and blood, and her hands trembled as she looked at her reflection in a broken mirror. "Is this necessary, Naomi?" the special effects technician asked, while adjusting the details on her skin. His tone was professional, but his words failed to calm her. Naomi took a deep breath and looked away. She didn't want to see the image of herself as a victim, not when she was fighting to stay strong. The plan was simple in theory, but every step was fraught with uncertainty. The operation would take place on a less-traveled road near the city. The police would simulate a car accident in which Naomi would be the only one involved. A wrecked car, skid marks on the asphalt, and an immobile body. Everything had to be convincing. The team moved with precision, installing hidden cameras nearby. Naomi was lying on the ground, covered by a sheet, while technicians checked the final details. Detective Jones knelt beside her and spoke in a low voice. "You're sure about this, right? We can still stop." "There is no other option. This has to work," Naomi replied, although her voice trembled slightly. Detective Jones nodded and stood up. Naomi closed her eyes and tried to calm her breathing. She could hear the sounds of cars in the distance and the murmur of the team working. Every second felt like an eternity. When everything was ready, Detective Jones made an anonymous call to the nightclub where Julian worked. The message was clear. Naomi had been in an accident and was in critical condition. Julian's reaction would be the key. If he truly was involved in a plot against her, his response would betray him. From a nearby van, the police team monitored the cameras. Naomi, still immobile on the ground, had a small hidden microphone that would capture any words spoken near her. Detective Jones watched the screens with a frown, awaiting Julian's arrival. When Julian arrived, his car braked abruptly in the middle of the road. He rushed out, but instead of running toward the supposed accident, he stood a few feet away, observing. The expression on his face was hard to read. There was no desperation or genuine concern, only a cold calm. "So, I didn't have to lift a finger after all," he muttered to himself, but his voice was picked up by the microphones. The team in the van held their breath. Julian slowly approached Naomi's body, his steps echoing in the night. "I guess it's too late now," he said, with a twisted smile. His words were like a knife cutting the air. Then he pulled out his phone and dialed a number. "P, everything is done. It wasn't how we planned, but it turned out better. Now it's just a matter of time before things calm down and we can move forward." In the van, Detective Jones signaled the agents. It was enough. The audio and video recordings confirmed what they had suspected all along. Julian not only showed no remorse, but seemed to be celebrating. The agents moved quickly, surrounding Julian before he could react. He tried to resist, but was easily restrained. Naomi, still on the ground, slowly opened her eyes and sat up with the help of an officer. Her body trembled, not from the night air, but from the intensity of the moment. Julian looked at her in disbelief as he was handcuffed. This is a trap! You can't do this to me!" he yelled, his voice full of rage. Naomi approached slowly, keeping her gaze fixed on him. There were tears in her eyes, but also a strength Julian had never seen before. "You did this to yourself, Julian. I just made sure justice was served." Julian's figure disappeared into the darkness with the police. Naomi stood next to the fake accident scene. Detective Jones approached her and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did the right thing. This won't be easy, but you're safe now." Naomi nodded, although she wasn't sure if those words were true. She had won a battle, but the price she had paid was higher than she could bear in that moment. She looked at the wrecked car and the cameras, wondering if she could ever recover the life she had lost. As the operation came to an end, an officer approached with a phone in hand. "Naomi, there's something you should hear." It was a voicemail left by Duke. His tone was mocking, almost as if he knew they were recording him. "You think it's over, but this is nothing more than the beginning. Julian wasn't alone, and neither will you be." The message left everyone silent. Detective Jones frowned and looked at Naomi. "This isn't over. We'll have to be prepared for what's coming." Naomi looked into the distance, sensing that her struggle was just beginning. The shadows surrounding Julian were deeper than she had imagined, and now she knew her life would never be the same. Hours later, the tension in the interrogation room was palpable. Julian was sitting on the other side of the table, handcuffed and staring at the floor. His expression alternated between contained rage and cold indifference. Behind the two-way mirror, Naomi watched the scene next to Detective Jones. Although she knew she was safe, Julian's presence a few feet away filled her with a visceral fear she struggled to control. "We need him to talk, but it won't be easy," Detective Jones murmured, crossing his arms as he studied Julian through the glass. "He's smart and knows anything he says can be used against him. I know him. He'll play the innocent man, the betrayed husband. But we know what he is," Naomi replied with a firmness that concealed the storm inside her. Detective Jones nodded before entering the room, leaving Naomi behind the glass. She knew this moment would be decisive, but that didn't make it any easier. Her hands trembled slightly as she clenched her fists, trying to control the mix of emotions threatening to overwhelm her. Inside the room, Detective Jones placed a recorder on the table and sat in front of Julian. "So, Julian, do you want to explain why you were celebrating your wife's death instead of worrying about her?" Julian slowly looked up with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I don't know what you're talking about. I was called, told she'd had an accident, and when I arrived, to my surprise, everything was a staged show. You should be questioning her, not me. We have recordings, Julian. Messages, bank transfers, everything points to you planning to eliminate Naomi, and you weren't alone. We want the names of your accomplices." Julian leaned forward, his voice low and laced with venom. "Circumstantial evidence, nothing a good lawyer can't dismantle. And as for my accomplices, I don't know what you're talking about. Maybe you should look among the people Naomi trusts. Maybe she's not as innocent as she wants you to believe." Detective Jones remained calm, but behind the glass, Naomi felt her heart pound fiercely. Julian's manipulation was calculated, and his ability to spin the narrative was terrifying. For an instant, she remembered why she had fallen for him. His charisma, his confidence. Now those same qualities were what made him so dangerous. Later, in a separate room, Naomi sat in front of Detective Jones and the investigation team. On the table was a detailed report with Julian's recordings and his financial history. Each page was a reminder of how she had lived with a man who had betrayed her in the deepest ways. Duke is our priority now. We know he was involved in the plan, but that voicemail he left implies there are more people in play. This could be bigger than we think, Detective Jones said, pointing to the notes in the report. What does that mean for me? Isn't catching Julian enough? Naomi asked, her voice laden with fatigue. Julian is just one piece. If Duke has more allies, they might try something against you. We need to guarantee your safety while we continue investigating. Naomi nodded, although the idea of living under constant surveillance made her feel even more trapped. She had dreamed of the moment Julian would be arrested, thinking it would be the end of her nightmare. But now she realized it was just the beginning. That night, in the solitude of a safe room provided by the police, Naomi tried to process everything that was happening. The walls were cold and devoid of any decoration, an overwhelming contrast to the home she had shared with Julian. She sat on the edge of the bed, holding her phone in her hands. She decided to call Chloe, her best friend. She needed a human connection, someone not related to the police operation or the horrors surrounding her. Chloe, it's me, her voice trembling slightly. Naomi, I've been so worried. I haven't heard anything from you since everything broke in the news. Are you okay? I don't know. It all feels so unreal. Julian is in custody, but there's still so much I don't understand. Everything I thought I knew about my life, about him, has collapsed. Chloe paused before responding, her tone full of concern. You're stronger than you think, Naomi. You've survived all of this, and you are not alone. Don't let him or anyone else make you feel otherwise. Chloe's words offered momentary comfort, but the sense of threat did not disappear. She hung up and lay down on the bed, closing her eyes tightly. Although surrounded by secure walls, she felt more vulnerable than ever. The next day brought an unexpected turn. Detective Jones called Naomi to the precinct to show her a new recording. Leo, the informant who had infiltrated Duke's circle, had captured a crucial conversation. They're looking to finish what Julian couldn't do. They want to silence her forever before she can testify, Detective Jones said, his tone more grave than usual. Why? They already have Julian. What more do they want? Naomi asked, her voice full of disbelief. This isn't just about you. It seems there are other illicit businesses at stake, and your testimony could expose them. To them, you are a problem that needs to disappear. Detective Jones's words hit Naomi like a blast of cold wind. She wasn't just facing Julian, but a network of people willing to do anything to protect their interests. Fear and rage mixed inside her, but instead of paralyzing her, they ignited something deeper, a fierce determination to survive and bring them all to justice. We will give everything necessary to protect you, but this means things could get even more dangerous before it ends, Detective Jones said, looking directly at her. I don't care what it costs. I will not let them silence me. They played with me, but now I'll play with them. Naomi replied with an intensity in her voice that surprised even the detective. The war had not ended. It was just beginning. Rain lashed heavily against the precinct windows. Inside, the atmosphere was charged with tension. Naomi sat in a conference room, surrounded by a team of officers, reviewing the details of the next phase of the operation. The message captured by Leo had changed the rules of the game. Now it wasn't just about prosecuting Julian, but dismantling the entire network behind him. Detective Jones got up from his chair and walked the room with firm steps. His eyes stopped on Naomi, who was staring at him, searching for some certainty that all this would end soon. Naomi, here's what we'll do, Detective Jones said gravely. Leo has given us key information about the location of a meeting between Duke and the rest of his allies. It will be at a warehouse outside the city. We believe they plan to discuss how to eliminate you and ensure Julian doesn't talk." Naomi swallowed hard. Every time she heard the word eliminate, she felt something break inside her. But she couldn't show weakness. Not when she was so close to confronting those who had tried to destroy her. "What do you need me to do?" she asked, her voice firm despite the anxiety consuming her. Detective Jones shook his head. "I don't want you anywhere near that meeting. It's too dangerous. This isn't just about you guys. This is my problem. I won't sit by while others risk their lives for something I started," Naomi responded, standing up from her chair. The room fell silent. Detective Jones looked at her with a mixture of admiration and concern. He knew arguing with her was futile. "Fine, but this is non-negotiable. You will be under our direct protection, and if anything goes wrong, your safety is our priority." That night, the team prepared for the operation. In a disguised vehicle, Naomi and Detective Jones waited at a safe distance from the warehouse. From their position, they could see the flickering lights and figures entering and leaving the building. Leo was already inside, equipped with a hidden microphone that transmitted everything in real time. "They're here. Duke just arrived with 2 other men," Leo reported over the radio. His voice sounded calm, but Naomi knew every word was fraught with risk. From the vehicle, Naomi listened to the conversation intently. Duke was talking, and his tone was as cold as she had imagined. "We can't risk it. She's already made too much noise. If she testifies, she'll sink not only us but everyone else. We need to finish this, and fast." One of the men responded, his voice rough and full of distrust. "What if the police already know too much? It might not be as easy as you think." "That's why we have a plan," Duke retorted. "The men are ready. It's just a matter of waiting for the right moment." Naomi felt the air in her lungs grow heavy. They were talking about her as if she were an object, an obstacle to be removed for their convenience. Rage grew inside her, but she couldn't let it dominate her. She needed to think clearly. Detective Jones gave the signal for his team to move. Several police vehicles surrounded the warehouse, blocking all exits. Inside, Leo maintained his cover, feigning surprise when the agents burst in with weapons raised. "Freeze! Police! Everyone on the ground!" one of the officers shouted as the tension exploded. Duke and his men tried to resist. One of them fired toward the agents, unleashing an exchange of gunfire that echoed throughout the building. From the vehicle, Naomi listened to the shots, her heart beating frantically. Detective Jones, sitting next to her, monitored the operation with a radio in his hand. "We have 2 detainees. Duke is resisting, but he won't get far," one of the agents reported. The confrontation continued for several minutes until the police managed to subdue Duke and the other men. When it was over, silence filled the space, broken only by the sound of handcuffs clicking shut and the agent's orders. Duke was taken to the precinct and placed in a separate cell from Julian. Naomi, still processing the intensity of the operation, decided to see him. Detective Jones tried to dissuade her, but she insisted. She needed to confront him, see him face to face, and understand what kind of monster had been conspiring against her life. When Naomi entered the interrogation room, Duke looked at her with a mocking smile. There was no remorse on his face, only contempt. "The little princess thinks she's strong now," Duke said sarcastically. "You think because you caught Julian and me this is over? You have no idea what you've started." "I know exactly what I've started, and I also know that you and your allies are going to pay for all the damage you've caused," Naomi replied with a firmness that surprised even Detective Jones, who was observing from outside. "Allies?" Duke sneered. "You think this is just about me and Julian? There are people much bigger than us. People who wouldn't hesitate to destroy you if you keep sticking your nose where it doesn't belong." Naomi stared at him, letting his words sink in. She wasn't going to let Duke intimidate her. "Then they will fall too, because I'm not going to stop until all of this ends," she said before getting up and leaving the room. That night, as Naomi returned to her safe room, the feeling of danger did not disappear. She knew she had won an important battle, but Duke's words continued to resonate in her mind. This wasn't over. There were more people involved, more secrets to uncover, and although the path was terrifying, she was determined to face it. She looked out the window, watching the city lights in the distance. She was more alone than ever, but also more determined. It wasn't just for her. It was for all the people who had ever been silenced by those who hadn't had the chance to fight. And she knew she wouldn't stop until the truth came to light. The light from the monitors illuminated the small room where the investigation team reviewed the latest recordings obtained after Duke's capture. In the audios, names, addresses, and fragments of conversations were heard, revealing a larger scheme than anyone had anticipated. Every word made it clear that the network of corruption and organized crime did not end with Julian and Duke. There was something deeper, a structure designed to operate in the shadows. Naomi sat next to Detective Jones, feeling the weight of each revelation. At times the rage and fear suffocated her, but she knew that backing down was not an option. "We have new names. Some of them are linked to major corporations and government contracts. This isn't just a case of attempted homicide, Naomi. This could be the beginning of something much bigger," Detective Jones said, pointing to the screen. "And what do we do now?" Naomi asked, her voice restrained but with a tone of urgency. "The first thing is to protect you. You're a target, not just for being the initial victim, but because now they know you have enough information to hurt them." Naomi nodded, although the feeling of constant danger was no longer new to her. She looked at the screen where one man, in particular, stood out in the records, Clayton Albright. The image of the man with his neat face and elegant demeanor hit her like lightning. Albright was not only an influential businessman with political connections, he was her stepfather. The air seemed to thicken as Naomi processed the discovery. Her relationship with Albright had always been distant, marked by his cold and controlling attitude, but she never imagined he could be involved in something like this. "Albright, he can't be involved," she murmured more to herself than to Detective Jones. "You know him?" Detective Jones asked, noting the change in her. Naomi nodded slowly. "He's my stepfather. He was married to my mother for years. He was always a reserved, controlling man, but I didn't think he was capable of this." The silence that followed was tense. Detective Jones looked at her seriously, evaluating what he had just heard. "This complicates things. If Albright is involved, it means this is personal. We need to act quickly before he does something to cover his tracks." The urgency of the situation led the team to intercept Albright's communications. What they heard confirmed the worst. In one of the captured calls, Albright spoke with someone whose voice Naomi immediately recognized, her mother, Adrienne. "Everything is getting complicated. Naomi is too involved. We can't let this come to light, or it will end up sinking us," Albright said in an authoritarian tone. "I warned you, Clayton. I told you we should have acted sooner, but you hesitated, and now everything is out of control." Her mother responded with a coldness that Naomi found chilling. Naomi felt the ground under her feet begin to crumble. Her own mother, the woman who should protect her, was complicit with Albright in a plan to destroy her. "It can't be," she said softly, her hands trembling as she listened to the rest of the conversation. "We can still salvage this," Albright continued. "If we manage to make her disappear before she testifies, everything will calm down. Julian is already out of the game. Now she's the only obstacle." Naomi looked away from the screen, unable to listen further. Detective Jones looked at her with concern, placing a hand on her shoulder. "I know this is a lot, but we need you to stay strong. What they just said is enough to incriminate them both. We will act, but it will be risky." "My mother," Naomi said, her voice barely a whisper. "All this time, she knew. She was with them." "We're going to stop them. This isn't just about them. This is for everything you've been through. We won't let this go unpunished." That night, the team organized a raid on Albright's mansion, where they believed he still kept incriminating documents. The operation was charged with tension. not only because of the magnitude of the case, but because of the personal implications for Naomi. She was in a nearby van, observing through real-time cameras. When the agents broke into the property, they found Albright and her mother in a heated discussion. Documents were scattered on a table, evidencing contracts, transfers, and a network of illegal activities. "This is a mistake. You have nothing against me," Albright shouted as the agents handcuffed him. "And what are you going to do with her? Arrest a mother for protecting her daughter?" her mother said with a bitter smile as she gestured toward the police. From the van, Naomi watched the heartbreaking scene. Detective Jones approached and asked if she wanted to go in, but she shook her head. "I can't see her now. I can't face her." Hours later, at the precinct, Albright and her mother were placed in separate cells. Naomi, though emotionally exhausted, decided to confront her mother. She walked slowly toward the interrogation room where her mother was sitting, handcuffed, and with a weary look. "Why?" Naomi asked, her voice breaking. Her mother looked up, her eyes showing a mixture of sadness and coldness. "I did what I had to do. Clayton promised me we would be safe, that you would be safe. I never imagined it would go this far." "Safe? You wanted to destroy me," Naomi responded, her words full of rage. "You don't understand. You can't understand. Everything I did was for us. But you became a problem, Naomi. You left no other option." Naomi felt tears streaming down her face, but she couldn't stop them. She looked at her mother one last time before leaving the room, leaving behind a silence that seemed eternal. That night, as the team reviewed the seized documents, Detective Jones approached Naomi and offered her a cup of coffee. "You took a significant step today. This isn't going to be easy, but we're closer to ending this." Naomi nodded, although the words of comfort barely made a dent in her pain. She had lost her mother, not just physically, but emotionally. The enemy had not only been in the shadows, it had also been in her own home. But she knew she couldn't stop, not now. The fight was far from over, and she would not allow herself to fall. Months later, the day of the trial had arrived. The courtroom was packed, the tension palpable in every corner as voices murmured around Naomi, who was seated next to the prosecutors. It was the day to face Julian, Duke, Albright, and, most difficult of all, her own mother. The mountain of evidence accumulated by the police, from the recordings to the confiscated documents, had made this case a matter of national interest. Naomi, hands clasped, watched as the judge took his seat. Facing her were the defendants, each with a different expression. Julian avoided her gaze, Duke wore a mocking smile, and Albright maintained an expression of false serenity. Her mother, Adrienne, on the other hand, looked like a ghost of her former self, with dull eyes and her head bowed. The lead prosecutor opened the case forcefully, presenting a detailed summary of the crimes: conspiracy to commit murder, corruption, money laundering, and manipulation of contracts. Each word struck Naomi's heart with the force of a hammer, but she remained firm. It was her moment to regain control of her life. During the trial, the recordings of Julian and Duke were played before the court. The voices of both men, meticulously planning how to get rid of Naomi, resonated in the room. Julian kept his eyes downcast, while Duke seemed to enjoy the attention. Then, it was the turn of the evidence linking Albright to the corruption network. The bank transfers and illegal contracts spoke for themselves. When it was her mother's turn, Naomi felt the air grow heavier. The prosecutor presented the telephone conversations that incriminated her, showing how she had actively collaborated with Albright. Her mother did not deny anything. When the judge gave her the opportunity to speak, she looked up at Naomi, but her words did not seek absolution. "I made mistakes, but they were out of desperation. I never wanted this to end this way. There is no justification for what I did, but I hope that someday you can understand," she said. Her mother's words, although laden with regret, could not erase the pain she had caused. After weeks of hearings, the day of sentencing arrived. The judge, in a solemn tone, began reading the convictions. Julian Vance, for conspiracy to commit murder and money laundering, is hereby sentenced to 20 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. Julian barely reacted, his face hardened by defeat. Francisco Duke Miller, for conspiracy and participation in organized criminal activities, is hereby sentenced to 25 years in federal prison, with parole reviewable after 15 years. Duke merely shrugged, as if the weight of the sentence didn't matter to him. Clayton Albright, for corruption, conspiracy to commit murder, and manipulation of government contracts, is hereby sentenced to 30 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. Albright maintained his composure, but the tension in his jaw betrayed his contained rage. The judge paused before reading the last sentence. Adrienne Albright, for conspiracy to commit murder and cover-up, is hereby sentenced to 10 years in federal prison, with the possibility of parole after serving half the sentence. Naomi felt a mixture of relief and sadness. She knew her mother would no longer be part of her life, but she also knew she had done the right thing by testifying against her. When it was all over, Naomi left the courthouse surrounded by reporters and cameras. Questions poured in from all directions, but she said nothing. She walked silently toward the waiting car, accompanied by Detective Jones, who had become an invaluable support throughout the entire process. "How do you feel?" Detective Jones asked as they got into the vehicle. "Relieved, I suppose, but also exhausted. This isn't just about justice. It's a loss of everything I once thought I had," Naomi replied, looking out the window. "What you've done is brave, not just for you, but for all the people who have suffered something similar. This network will never harm anyone again." Naomi nodded. Detective Jones's words were true, but the emptiness she felt wasn't easily filled. She had won, but the cost had been high. Months later, Naomi had begun to rebuild her life. She had left behind her work as a patent lawyer and had started a foundation to help victims of conspiracies and abuse. Her experience had transformed her into a strong and resilient voice, a woman determined to make a difference. One day, while organizing a charity event, she received a letter from prison. It was from her mother. Naomi held it in her hands for several minutes before opening it. The content was brief, but charged with emotion. "Naomi, I know I have no right to ask you for anything, but I want you to know that I'm remorseful. I don't expect your forgiveness. I just want you to live a full life, something I never knew how to do. I love you, even if I don't deserve it. Mom." Naomi closed the letter and put it away in a drawer. She didn't know if she was ready to forgive her, but she also knew that hatred would lead her nowhere. Inside, something began to heal. That night, as she looked at the city lights from her apartment window, Naomi felt a peace she hadn't experienced in months. She knew the struggle was over. Her life would never be the same, but she was willing to build something new, something better. And in that moment, for the first time, she felt that she would succeed. Did you like the story, and which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you liked the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.